The autumn of 1914 was expected to bring victory parades, not endless suffering. Young men marched off to war, convinced it would be over by Christmas, a war of movement, not stagnation. But the Western Front became a static, brutal landscape, transformed by machine guns and artillery. Advancing meant suicide. Armies stalled, locked in a deadly stalemate. As November set in, trenches stretched from the North Sea to Switzerland, crude ditches dug for survival, not permanence. The land became a wasteland of mud, shattered trees and barbed wire. No man's land, a narrow strip between the lines, was a graveyard and a constant reminder of the war's cost. Soldiers' worlds shrank to muddy corridors, their view limited to grey sky and earth. Grand strategies faded. Survival became personal, against the elements, snipers and fear. The war had not ended by Christmas. It had dug in for the long haul. Winter was coming, and the trenches would become their world. The war that was supposed to move had come to a standstill. Winter 1914 brought a new enemy, the cold. Soldiers dressed for summer faced freezing winds and relentless damp. Nights were bitter, the ground froze, and men huddled for warmth, sleep elusive. Rain turned Flanders clay into a sucking morass. Trenches collapsed, filling with mud and filth. The mud was deadly, swallowing boots, equipment, even men. Frostbite struck fingers, toes, and faces, sometimes leading to gangrene and amputation. Circulation was hard to maintain in cramped trenches. The cold drained morale, turning the world into a grey, wet prison. Clothes and blankets were always damp, feet were constantly submerged in icy water. The comforts of warmth and dryness became distant memories. Constant exposure wore down bodies and minds, making illness and despair common. Surviving the enemy was one thing, surviving the winter was another. The cold was as relentless as any foe. The first winter's tragedy began with a fatal miscalculation. Leaders believed the war would be short, planning for movement, not attrition. Soldiers went to the front with light gear, expecting to be home by Christmas. There were no plans or supplies for winter. Armies were unprepared for static trench warfare. High command clung to old tactics, ordering futile attacks that only deepened the stalemate. Soldiers' early optimism faded into grim realism as letters home turned somber. The failure to anticipate a long war led to food shortages, inadequate medical care, and no troop rotation. Men were left to improvise, adapting to survive in squalid trenches. The first winter was a harsh lesson in the cost of underestimating modern war. It exposed the price of poor foresight and shattered illusions. Among the many miseries, trench foot was one of the most feared. Caused by constant exposure to cold, wet, unsanitary conditions, it could lead to permanent disability. Feet swelled, turned numb, blistered, and sometimes decayed. Gangrene often followed. The smell of rotting flesh haunted the trenches. Severe cases required amputation. Tens of thousands suffered. Medical services were overwhelmed and initially clueless about treatment. The fear of losing mobility was constant. Immobility meant death in an attack. Trench foot was a silent enemy, born of the trenches themselves. Prevention became a matter of life and death. Dry socks, whale oil, and vigilance. It was a battle fought not with bullets, but with discipline and hope for warmth. Survival demanded adaptation and ingenuity. Soldiers invented solutions, duckboards to keep feet out of mud, deeper dugouts for shelter. Walls were reinforced with sandbags and scavenged materials, Some dugouts became surprisingly elaborate. High command slowly responded, issuing sheepskin coats, waterproofs, and rubber waders. Troop rotation was introduced. Front line, support, then rest in reserve. This system preserved health and morale, offering rare moments of safety. Discipline became crucial: regular foot inspections, working in pairs, and applying whale oil. Small rituals, mundane but vital, meant survival. The trenches became classrooms of hard-earned lessons. Survival depended as much on management and discipline as on courage. Ingenuity was as important as bravery. In the trenches, food and drink became lifelines. Rations were hard-won, carried through danger, often cold and monotonous. Hot meals were rare luxuries, lifting spirits when they arrived. Soldiers improvised, using small stoves to heat food or brew tea. Tea was a ritual, a taste of home amid chaos. Alcohol, rum for the British, wine for the French, schnapps for the Germans, offered brief warmth and courage. These small comforts were psychological anchors, building bonds and providing respite. Sharing food, drink, or a cigarette was an act of solidarity. Simple rituals gave structure to days and moments of peace. Inhuman conditions made these comforts essential. Even in mud and cold, humanity endured. A sip of warmth could mean hope. Disease was a constant, invisible enemy. Trenches were open sewers. Stagnant water, waste, and unburied bodies bred germs. Dysentery and stomach illnesses were rampant, sapping strength. Lice infested uniforms, causing relentless itching and spreading trench fever. Trench fever brought high fevers and pain, sidelining soldiers for weeks. Respiratory illnesses spread quickly in cramped dugouts. Medical services were overwhelmed, focused on wounds, not disease. The first winter taught the importance of sanitation and pest control. Preventing disease became as vital as fighting the enemy. Survival depended on the bonds between soldiers. The platoon became family, men you lived and fought with, your lifeline. Comrades shared food, water, and comfort, helping each other through fear and hardship. Teamwork and discipline were essential. One mistake could mean disaster for all. Shared routines and dark humor forged a unique group identity. Slang and inside jokes separated them from the outside world, building solidarity. Humor was a coping mechanism, making the unbearable bearable. Loyalty to comrades often outweighed loyalty to nation or cause. Letters home spoke of deep respect and love for fellow soldiers. This brotherhood gave them strength to endure the unendurable. In the end, it was human connection that kept them going. The trenches forged bonds that lasted a lifetime. The first winter was a brutal education, stripping away illusions of glory. Soldiers emerged scarred but resilient, forever changed by what they endured. Armies adapted. Better clothing, shelters, and medical protocols became priorities. Troop rotation and sanitation were hard-won lessons that saved lives. The experience shaped a generation, fueling distrust of authority and anti-war sentiment. Lest we forget became a warning, not just a memorial. Today, the memory of that winter reminds us of war's true cost. Faded photos show not just history, but the limits of human endurance. The trenches taught the value of preparation, teamwork, and shared humanity. Even in the coldest winters, the human spirit can endure.